Welcome to Betrayal Narrative X.
I'm not one of those people who goes through my wife's phone or watches her every move. I've always believed that trust is the foundation of any relationship. And you know what? That's the biggest mistake of my life. Let's get acquainted. Write in the comments, what city and country are you from? My name is Michael. I'm 34. I work in IT. And my wife, Lisa, has always lived large on my dime. We've been married 5 years, no kids, because she's not ready to sacrifice her freedom yet. But that was fine with me at the time. I earn good money, so I always please her with gifts, vacations in warm countries, and expensive dinners. She never worked and generally thought that her task was just to be beautiful and create an atmosphere in the house. I've long wondered where it all started, when exactly the one I loved turned into a lying, manipulative bitch for whom I was just a convenient ATM. Maybe the first bells rang when she started staying out with her friends more often, or when she suddenly had too many trips around town, ostensibly to beauty salons, shopping, the fitness room, or maybe I was just a blind idiot who closed my own eyes to the obvious. A couple of months ago, I noticed that Lisa was literally never parting with her phone. She used to leave it in her room or in the kitchen when she went to take a shower, but now it was always with her. Once I saw her quickly deleting something from the chat room when I walked into the bedroom. I didn't think much of it at the time, though something in the back of my mind tingled. A little later, I began to notice that the same driver always appeared in her Uber rides. His name would appear over and over again in the order history, whether she was going to the mall, to a friend's house, or just to the supermarket. I even made a joke about it once. "Liz, you got chauffeur in there? Wouldn't it be cheaper to buy you a car?" "Oh my God, Michael, are you going to control who I ride with now? Why don't you tell me what to wear? He just happens to be around a lot when I call for a car. That's all. Is it my fault he works in our neighborhood?" I chuckled then and didn't pursue the topic further. She seemed really pissed off. A couple weeks ago, I was working from home and overheard her talking on the phone. "You're just crazy." "No, really, I can't do this often. Michael will get suspicious." I felt a chill go through my insides after those words. She was silent, probably moving farther away, but I'd had enough. I stood in the doorway, waiting for her to notice me. After a moment, she turned and flinched when she saw me. "Who are you talking to?" "Yeah, with Emily." "What are you doing, Mike?" "We were just discussing tomorrow's meeting." She was lying. I could see it in her eyes, in the way she clutched the phone to her chest, as if guarding it from me. I could have checked it right away, demanded to see the messages, but at the time I still hoped I was wrong. "Yeah, then why did you say you can't do it that often?" "God, were you really listening to our conversation? It's not just controlling anymore, it's paranoid. I meant I can't go out with girls much because I have a husband." She spewed this lie with such confidence that I almost believed it. The next day I decided to check her phone for the first time. Not proud of it, but you know what? Sometimes intuition is stronger than morality. Naturally, I didn't find anything suspicious. Just texts with her friends, discussions about cosmetics, discounts, the restaurant she wanted to go to with me. No correspondence with this driver, no trace of him. But then I discovered Uber. The same name appeared over and over again in the travel history. Sometimes she would call a car just 2 blocks from our house, and then drive back. Why? That's when I realized that if she was hiding her tracks so carefully, I couldn't find anything in her phone. I'd have to look elsewhere for evidence. The next day, I made a copy of her travel history. I don't know why. I just intuitively felt it was important. And a few days later, I saw them. It happened in the evening when I was coming home from work. I left the office, caught a cab, and was about to leave when suddenly I saw a familiar figure on the opposite side of the street. Lisa. She stood by the curb, smiling broadly at someone in a car. A couple seconds later, the door opened, and a tall, stout man with a short haircut and a chain around his neck stepped out of the cab. I could see him from the back, but I didn't need to see his face. I already knew who he was. They didn't notice me right away. She laughed, said something, and he leaned toward her, putting his hand on her waist. At that moment, something clicked in my head. I slowly got out of the car and made my way towards them. "Michael, what are you doing here?" I shifted my gaze to the driver. He didn't seem to realize who I was right away, but then his face took on an expression I'd seen on people in bad situations before. "I should have asked you the same thing, Liz. I was on my way home from the gym. Josh gave me a ride home. You're not going to make a scene out of nowhere, are you? Then why aren't you home?" "Because I went out to buy water at the store, in case you were wondering." She was lying. I could feel it in my skin. But for now, I decided to play along. Okay, I'll meet you at home. We need to talk. About what? About how much longer you're going to lie to my face. Lisa came home half an hour later, even though the store was only a 2-minute walk away. I sat in the kitchen with a bottle of water and tried to calm down. Everything was boiling inside, but I decided not to give her a reason to throw a tantrum right away. She walked in, slamming the door defiantly, as if I was to blame for her pathetic excuses. Okay, Michael, let's get this straight. I'm not going to put up with your paranoid bullshit. She threw her bag on the couch and folded her arms across her chest, showing me that she was ready to attack. But she didn't realize one thing. I wasn't going to play her game anymore. Liz, sit down. Let's talk calmly, without yelling or making a scene. She rolled her eyes, but still sat across from me, crossing her legs and staring defiantly at her phone. That's great. Go ahead, say it. But hurry up, I've got a lot to do. Are you cheating on me? She twitched an eyebrow, but like a seasoned actress, she immediately feigned indignation. Are you out of your mind? Michael, do you have any idea what you're saying? Yes, Liz. I do. And I have reason to think so. God, this isn't funny anymore. Are you out of your mind? I reached for my phone and opened her Uber ride history. If you're not guilty of anything, then explain to me why almost all of your trips in the last 3 months have been with the same driver? She hesitated for a second, but immediately found her way out. Who cares who I ride with? Michael, do you have any idea how the service works? If the rating is high, it's just picked up more often by the system. Really? Then why did you repeatedly call for a car from a different street than your house? Lisa pressed her lips together and quickly stared at the screen, pretending she wasn't interested. It was more convenient for me. You know that sometimes you can't get a car in front of your house. Uh-huh. And that's why it was more convenient for you to walk 3 blocks first and then call a cab. She stood up abruptly and snorted. That's it. I'm not going to listen to this. She grabbed her bag and headed for the exit. Where are you going? Anywhere to avoid your absurd accusations. I didn't stop her. For the next week, Lisa acted as if nothing had happened. It was as if nothing had happened, as if my question about her fidelity was just a whim. She started being affectionate with me again, ordering food from my favorite restaurants, inviting me for walks. If I were a naive fool, I think I'd overreacted, that I'd screwed myself over. But I was no longer the blind idiot I used to be. One evening I said I was going to a meeting with my colleagues and would be back late. I took my keys, got into my car, and drove around the corner. I stopped on a nearby street and waited. It wasn't more than 20 minutes later when a familiar black sedan parked smoothly in front of our house. Lisa ran out without even looking back and, quickly getting into the car, slammed the door. I started the engine and followed. They drove around the city with no apparent purpose, stopped at a supermarket a couple times. But no one even got out of the car. They just sat and talked and then drove on. 20 minutes later, the car turned down a deserted alley and stopped. I slowed down at a distance so as not to attract attention. I turned on my phone and watched. At first only their silhouettes were visible, but after a moment it became clear what they were doing. She leaned toward him, her hand sliding to his chest. And then, even now, after a while, it's hard for me to describe how I felt then. Anger, disgust, rage? All together, 1,000 times stronger than I had ever felt before. I could break in there right now, blow the hell out of that car, pull her out by her hair, and make her confess everything. But instead, I pulled out my phone and took a few pictures. I waited to see enough to destroy her completely. When I got home, Lisa was already there, all calm and innocent. How was your meeting with your co-workers? That's great, Liz. I have a surprise for you tomorrow. Her eyes lit up with curiosity. Which one? You'll see. The next morning I woke up earlier than usual. Liza was still sleeping peacefully, covered by a thin blanket, and her face had an expression of absolute calm. I looked at her and tried to understand how someone I'd lived with for 5 years could lie so coldly to my face. I got up, went to the kitchen, and brewed myself some coffee. At 11 a.m., I did something Lisa certainly didn't expect. I ordered an Uber. You're not going to believe this, but I got the right driver. When the car stopped in front of the house, I took a deep breath and sat inside. The driver, a tall, stout guy in his mid-30s, glimpsed me in the rearview mirror and nodded. Where are we going? Just drive around the neighborhood. I need some time. I stared at him in the mirror, waiting for any hint of alarm, but he remained calm, as if he didn't even know who I was. How long have you been driving? I asked, trying to get him to talk. A couple years. A normal job, Free schedule, good money. I grinned, watching him casually hold the steering wheel. Yeah, it's also a good way to pick up married women, right? He tensed for a second, but quickly pulled himself together. You don't get it, do you? Lisa, my wife. Do you recognize the name? There was silence in the cabin. He wasn't looking in the mirror anymore, concentrating on the road. But the way he pressed his lips together, I knew I'd hit the mark. Look, man, you're not gonna make excuses. Not even gonna try to tell me I'm wrong. You already know everything, don't you? What do you want? I want you to tell me the truth. He gripped the steering wheel harder and turned down a deserted alley, bringing the car to a stop. Okay, I've been dating her for a couple months. Dating? I grinned bitterly. Call things by their proper names. You're just a lover she's been feeding her bullshit to, like me. Did she say anything about me? Yeah. She said you were suffocating her with your jealousy, that you're boring and cold. She lied to you. She lied to me. What? I pulled out my phone, opened the pictures I'd taken yesterday, and held it out to him. He took it hesitantly, but when he saw the pictures, his face contorted. This can't be. I picked up my phone and grinned. You thought she only had you. Welcome to reality. You do realize she's just using you, right? He looked at me, and doubt flashed in his eyes. What are you gonna do? I smiled and opened the door, enjoying the show. I came home feeling like control was completely in my hands. Lisa was sitting on the couch flipping through her phone, pretending I wasn't there. Did you go somewhere? I sat down across from her and looked at her carefully. Yeah, business. I have plans tonight too, in case you want to make a scene again. Oh, let's talk about tonight. What again? I'm just wondering, if I ask you one question, will you lie again? Michael, you're getting tiresome. I turned on the tape. Her lover's voice came from the speaker. She and I have been dating for a couple months. Lisa turned pale. She said you were suffocating her with your jealousy. You thought she had you all to herself. I pressed pause and looked at her. What do you say now? Fear flashed in her eyes for a second, but then she quickly pulled herself together and stood up. Are you spying on me? That's just pathetic. I laughed, but there was no joy in my laughter. Pathetic? Lisa, you're the one spending time with the cabbie in his car, not me. You're just not giving me what I want. Like being his temporary girlfriend on me? Okay, Michael, I'm tired. If you're so stupid that you don't realize I need more than a boring husband, that's your problem. You're right. This is my problem, but not yours anymore. I tossed the paper into her lap. She turned it around and I saw her lips quiver. This is divorce papers. She swallowed convulsively and looked at me wide-eyed. You can't do that. I grinned. Trust me, Liz. I can. She jumped up, her hands trembling. What about our house? Money? I shrugged. You have your cab driver. Maybe he'll pay for your whims. She clutched the papers and threw them down on the table with force. You're gonna regret this. I looked at her and realized I wasn't interested in listening to her threats anymore. I think, Liz, you're the one who's about to regret it. I wasted 5 years with a woman who never really loved me. It wasn't a mistake of a single moment, some spontaneous act that could be forgiven. It was a conscious choice to cheat, to lie, to manipulate, to make an idiot out of me. But the funny thing was, she didn't even try to justify herself. There was no remorse in her eyes, no attempt to save the relationship, only rage at having been exposed. I took a deep breath and started the engine. Today I wanted to set the record straight. I came home that evening. Lisa was sitting in the kitchen, arms crossed, and staring at her phone, but I knew she was waiting for me. Well, finally. She lifted her head and looked at me with a frown. Are you going to have a normal conversation, or are you going to keep acting like a child? I grinned, took off my jacket, and sat down leisurely across from her. What do you want to talk about, Liz? About how you slept with a cab driver, or how you thought I'd never find out? She grimaced, but quickly regained her usual haughty expression. About you acting like a psycho. Psycho? I laughed and pulled out my phone. Hey, why don't we see who's crazy? I opened the tape of their conversation and turned back on the moment where her lover said they'd been dating for a couple months. She tossed the phone on the table as if that might erase all evidence. That's enough. I already heard that. Really? Then why don't you want to talk about it? She sighed irritably, as if I was boring her with some stupid question. Because I'm sick of hearing your accusations. Yes, Michael, I cheated on you. So what now? So what? I shook my head and grinned. Do you even hear yourself? Oh, don't you start. She rolled her eyes and stood up. You drove me into this. You're boring. You're predictable. You only think about work. And I want to feel alive. Is that why you chose to sleep in a car with a cab driver? She frowned, but immediately flared up again. What was I supposed to do? Sit at home and wait for you to come home from work once again, tired and indifferent? Indifferent? Are you serious? I laughed and shook my head. Lisa, I provided you with a comfortable life. I never denied you anything. I gave you everything I could. Yeah, except for the emotions. She leaned forward and jabbed her finger into my side. You're a walking ATM machine, Michael. I fell silent, then nodded slowly. Well, thank you for finally telling the truth. She opened her mouth, but immediately stopped, realizing she'd said too much. I didn't mean that. No, you said exactly what you thought you said. I stood up, picked up an envelope from the couch, and tossed it on her desk. What the hell is this? She frowned and reached for the papers. This is our bank statement. Look how much money you've spent in the last year. She unfolded the pages and began leafing through them, frowning her forehead. And right here, I pointed my finger at a particular line. See this amount? That's the money I've spent on you. From beauty salons to trips to Miami with your girlfriends. Her face hardened, and she tossed the papers back on the table. So, now you want to count how much it took on me? No, Liz. I want you to realize that this ends now. She frowned, but still tried to keep her face. You think I want your money? I grinned slowly and pulled out another sheet. It's a tentative agreement to divide the property. Her eyes flashed with anger. You want to leave me with nothing. You'll get exactly what you deserve. She jumped up, nearly knocking over her chair. You're so pathetic. You think I won't find someone better? You don't think I'll make it in life? I shrugged and looked at her calmly. I'm sure you will. Just not on me. She trembled with anger, grabbed the papers and threw them at me. You'll be sorry. I nodded, gathered my papers, and headed for the exit. Liz, I've already wasted too much time on you. She was silent, and I walked out, closing the door behind me. When I closed the door behind me, I wasn't haunted by guilt, or regret, or even anger. Only the realization that I was finally rid of it all. Lisa didn't run out after me, didn't throw a tantrum in the entryway, didn't beg to stay. She was always sure that she could get away with it, that her manipulations would work once again. But now I could see right through her, and all her power over me was gone. I got into the car, threw my papers on the passenger seat, and for a while I just stared in front of me. Surprisingly, I wasn't even in pain. I'd never felt so free in my life. I took a deep breath, started the engine, and drove off. But the story didn't end there. I decided to go to my best friend, Dan. I could trust him, and I needed someone to talk to. When I walked into his apartment, he knew right away that something serious had happened. You look like you just came out of the fires of hell. He gestured to the couch and pulled 2 bottles of beer from the fridge. Almost there. I picked up the bottle and took a sip. I'd finally sent Lisa to hell. He slowly set his beer on the table, raised his eyebrows, and whistled. You did? You finally broke up with her? I nodded and grinned. And he filed for divorce. Dan grinned and patted my shoulder. Well, congratulations. It's about time. We had a drink and I told him the whole story, including how I'd filmed Lisa with her cab driver, how I'd brought her out, and how she'd thrown another tantrum. Wait, you actually got in the car with this dude and talked to him calmly? Uh-huh. And you know what the funny thing is? I showed him the pictures, and he realized he was just a backup for her, too. Look, what if she doesn't give up that easily? I don't care. Let her do what she wants. She's out of my life. The next day, I got a call from my supervisor, and I immediately knew something was wrong. Michael, I just got an official letter of complaint against you. A complaint? From whom? From your wife. What? She claims that you allegedly threatened her, acted aggressively, and even raised your hand to her. This is total bullshit. I know, Michael. But do you realize how these things work now? We need to deal with this officially. I couldn't believe she was so pathetic that she decided to play big. When I arrived at our house, she was already standing in the driveway, arms crossed over her chest, and sporting a victorious smile. Are you out of your mind? Oh, Michael, you didn't think you could just get rid of me, did you? Did you really go to the police with false accusations? I'll do anything to make you regret ditching me. You do realize it's easy to expose all this, right? Maybe. Or maybe I'll make your life so unbearable that you'll come crawling back to me on your knees. But she didn't know one thing. I was ready for war. Okay, Liz, game on, game off. She smiled, deciding she had won. I immediately called my lawyer and told him everything. You need to gather all the evidence. Do you have anything? I have a tape of her lover, confirming their relationship. It's perfect. Now we need to break her strategy. We acted quickly. I filed a counterclaim, attached evidence of her infidelity, as well as messages that showed she was manipulating me and threatening to ruin my life. 2 days later, I got a call from the police. "Mr. Michael, we have reason to believe that your wife filed a false report." I grinned and nodded, not even hiding my pleasure. "Oh, so you've already figured it out?" "It took us a little while, but yes, her application was invalidated." Lisa lost. When I got home, she was gone. She had moved out, leaving a note on the kitchen table. "You're going to regret this." I crumpled the paper and threw it in the trash. After Lisa moved out, I felt quiet and free for the first time in a long time. No one made a scene. No one accused me of all the deadly sins. No one burned through my money on meaningless whims. Even so, I knew she wouldn't give up so easily. She'd already tried to hit me through my work, through false accusations, and now that that plan had failed, I could only wait for her next move. I knew Lisa too well. She couldn't just walk away and accept defeat. A few days after her life fell apart, I started noticing strange things. I received several anonymous, threatening letters at work. Not so much that I could immediately file a police report, but unpleasant enough. "You're going to regret doing this to me. You thought you could just walk away. Wrong. Watch your back, Michael." I sat in my office, twirling the printouts of these messages in my hands, and realized that she was clearly the one who had done this. I called Dan, deciding I needed to discuss this with someone I could trust. "Well, hello, Winter." He grinned as I walked into his house. "From the look on your face, your ex didn't seem to be settling down, did she?" I threw the letters in front of him. He ran a quick glance over them and whistled. "What are you going to do about it?" "Nothing yet. She's trying to get me emotional. If I react, that's all she wants. Maybe it's a good idea to be safe. Who knows what else she's capable of?" I wondered. Dan was right. Lisa had already shown that she was willing to go to the extreme. "Maybe we should put cameras outside the house. And in the car, too," he added, "just in case." I nodded. It was a smart move. On Friday evening, I was coming home after a long day at work. Already on the drive home, I felt that something was wrong. In the parking lot outside my driveway was a familiar car, a black sedan. I slowed down and froze, watching her from afar. After a few seconds, the driver's door opened, and out stepped none other than Josh, her lover. He stood up, looked around, and lit a cigarette, clearly expecting someone. I exhaled and slowly parked to the side, keeping my eyes on him. It's too much of a coincidence. I got out of the car and headed for the driveway, deliberately ignoring him, but it seems he had other plans. "Hey, man." His voice came from right behind me. I stopped, turned around slowly, and crossed my arms over my chest. "What do you want?" He took a few steps in my direction, took a drag on his cigarette, and smirked. "Lisa said you're not the nicest person." Now I understand why she was looking for comfort on the side. I grinned, shaking my head. "Did you really come here with this?" "Just thought you should know." He shrugged. "She said you were boring, that you never gave her what she wanted." "Well, since you know her so well, then you should be careful. Yesterday you were the only one. Today you're one of many. Screw your man. Lisa warned me you were a pathetic loser." "Yeah." I nodded and took a step toward him. "But you're the one standing in front of me right now trying to prove your worth. Tell your girlfriend I don't care. Let her do whatever she wants." I turned around and strode into the entryway, leaving him behind. But I knew this wasn't the end. The next morning I got a call from my lawyer. "Michael, we need to meet right away." I arrived at his office an hour later, and he immediately handed me a printout of the paperwork. Lisa filed a countersuit. I frowned and picked up the papers. "What?" "She's demanding compensation for moral damages and half of your estate." I almost laughed. "On what grounds?" "She claims that you allegedly forced her to cheat by creating intolerable conditions in the marriage." I closed my eyes and squeezed the bridge of my nose, suppressing the urge to swear. "That's a load of crap." "Sure, but now we're going to have to take it to court." I looked at the paperwork and nodded slowly. "All right, if she wants a war, she'll get one." I walked out of the lawyer's office with the full realization that now I was going to have to finish Lisa off for good. She wasn't just trying to screw me over or get some money. She was trying to destroy me, to twist the situation to make it look like I was to blame for everything that had happened. I got in the car and started the engine, my mind going over the plan that had begun to take shape as soon as I saw her countersuit. If Lisa wanted a war, then I needed to strike first, and do it in such a way that she'd never be able to get up again. The first thing I did was stop by Dan's house, who was already waiting for me, anticipating more news. "So, what's it going to be this time?" He handed me a beer and sat down across from me. I tossed a copy of the documents I'd just gotten from the lawyer onto the table. "She wants half of my property and compensation for moral damages." Dan whistled, ran his eyes over the lines, and shook his head. "Do you have any idea how big her balls of steel are?" "Uh-huh. Only they won't help her, because I have trump cards on my hands that she can't fight. She was stealing money, Dan." He raised his eyebrows, but I continued. "I pulled up all the bank statements for the last 2 years. You know what I found?" He shook his head silently. "Transfers to unknown accounts that were in no way explained by her spending. She wasn't just living off me. She was saving on the side, preparing for such a moment." Dan whistled, leaning back on the back of the couch. "So she was preparing for this from the beginning?" "Looks like it." I opened my phone and showed him another detail. And here's the best part. I turned on the tape I'd made during our last conversation with Lisa. "You're just a walking ATM, Michael. I'll do anything to make you sorry. You can't just walk away." Dan shook his head, grinning. "Did you actually write that down?" "I knew she'd try to pull something, so I was prepared. I knew she'd try to pull something, so I prepared myself." I leaned back in my chair and took a sip of my beer. "So now I'll just wait for it to destroy itself." A week later, the first session of the divorce proceedings took place. Lisa sat across from me in the courtroom, arms crossed and a look of deep resentment on her face. She obviously expected the judge to buy her pathetic act. Her lawyer stood up and began reading the text, which seemed to have been prepared in advance for a predictable story about a victim of a tyrant. My client had been living in unbearable conditions for many years. She was forced to seek solace on the outside because her spouse completely ignored her needs. Moreover, after she confessed her feelings, he began to threaten and harass her. I sat still, showing no emotion. My lawyer only grinned and stood up when it was our turn to speak. "Dear court, we have evidence that the plaintiff not only cheated on our client, but also tried to take advantage of him financially." He turned on an audio recording of Lisa literally calling me an ATM machine. Her face changed instantly. I saw panic light up in her eyes, but there was nothing she could do now. The lawyer continued. "In addition, we have financial documents that show that the plaintiff transferred large sums of money to outside accounts without her spouse's knowledge." The judge raised his eyebrows, flipping through the papers we provided. "Anything you have to say for yourself, Mrs. Lisa?" She opened her mouth, but her lawyer immediately tugged at her sleeve, clearly letting her know that she was already in trouble up to her neck. The court decides to dismiss the plaintiff's claim. Moreover, in view of the evidence presented, the court considers it appropriate to rule in favor of the defendant. I was inwardly jubilant, but outwardly remained completely calm. Lisa won't get another dime from me. After the trial, Lisa caught up with me at the exit. "You're a bitch, Michael." "No, Lisa. I'm just not your fool anymore. You ruined my life." "No, Liz. You did this to yourself." A month after the trial, I found out that Lisa was trying to find a new rich boyfriend, but no one wanted to get involved with a woman who had been so publicly exposed. Josh, her lover, had also dropped out when he realized she could no longer live off the books that I bought a new apartment, changed jobs, and started a new life. A life without Lisa. And you know what? It was the best decision I ever made. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. If you like the story, please give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm show my content more often. If you are new to the channel, do not forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep making more stories for you.